It was the summer of 1986, and I was a camp counselor at Camp Arrowhead, a Lutheran camp in the San Bernardino Mountains of Southern California. A group of about 40 elementary kids, 6 counselors and helpers, and I were camping overnight in the Big Bear, California. It was a state park. Now, this area of the country is so dry in the summer that we didn't even need to bring any tents. No worries about rain. All we needed were our sleeping bags and our mats and rope to hang up the food so the critters wouldn't get it. After a night of singing and praying and stargazing, we settled in under the canopy of the large sequoia trees. I can't tell you what time it was, but I do know that it was still dark when the earth started shaking underneath me. Now, for this native New Yorker, the experience of the solid ground shifting was not a common occurrence. So I sat up in panic and I looked around, expecting everyone else to be just as concerned as I was. Not one person stirred. Was I dreaming? Did I make up the whole incident? I know what I felt. But since no one moved, I suppose I imagined it. We're used to trusting solid ground beneath us. Maybe some of you remember when the earth shook in Virginia last year, and we felt it all the way up here in Reading. That was scary. Unexpected, disconcerting to say the least. Any construction worker can tell you that the foundation is the most important part of the structure. It may not be pretty, it may not win design awards, and it's usually not even seen. But if that foundation is not correctly built, if it's not secure, your building, no matter how beautiful, how useful, will fall. Now, if you'll excuse me, I do teach Sunday school and children's messages, so whenever I hear this text, I think of the song, "The wise man built his house upon the rock." Kids love to sing this because you get to move, and the very last line goes, "And the house on the rock stood firm." But the kids really like the second house because you get to go, "The foolish man built his house upon the sand, and the house on the sand went splat." And they love to yell splat and make it all over. I don't think Jesus preached the words quite in the same way. But when he did preach these words, he was on top of a solid hill overlooking the Sea of Galilee. In the Sermon on the Mount, he was preaching above people. And Brian Stoffergen notes about this sermon, or this part of the sermon, it's interesting. Both the wise man and the foolish man in our texts do exactly the same thing. They build houses. The houses could have looked exactly alike. And it's not that their work or their houses were different, but their foundations, what normally can't be seen. And okay, I'm not a house builder, but I'm guessing that attaching a house to rock would be a lot harder than setting a house on sand. The difference between the two men in these verses is that the wise man hears Jesus' words and is doing them. The other one, labeled foolish, hears Jesus' words and is not doing them. There are no promises that life of discipleship will be easy. In fact, there are many passages that talk about the difficulties of following the way of Jesus. Although we don't usually publish the demands such as denying self, carrying your cross, or blessed are you when persecuted, we don't put these on church advertisements in the Reading Eagle because it's hard. On one hand, salvation is very easy. It comes by the gift of the grace of God, thanks be to God, and is not dependent on anything we do. On the other hand, responding to that grace by living a disciplined life can be very difficult. Working at and taking time to be connected to God is what gives us the solid foundation that stands up to destructive rains and floods and winds we will face in this life. So I wondered, what is that solid rock foundation Jesus talks about? The Greek word petra invokes a picture of a huge stone cliff. We're not talking pebbles. Think Grand Canyon, big stone rock cliffs. And Matthew uses this word 3 times in his gospel. In chapter 16, I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. Chapter 27, at that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in 2 from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks were split. And in 27, Joseph laid the body of Jesus in his own tomb, his new tomb, which he had hewn in the rock, and then rolled a great stone to the door of the tomb and went away. The commonality in all 3 of these verses is that God is more powerful than rocks, more steady than stone cliffs. Jesus told Peter that it wasn't his own efforts that produced the good confession, but it came from God in heaven. God can split rocks and cliffs, and a rock tomb cannot keep God from raising Jesus out of that tomb. You know, when I felt the earth move in California that summer, no one else woke up. And when I mentioned it in the morning, everyone dismissed me, claiming, "Oh, you're from New York. You don't know what an earthquake is. You were probably dreaming." Imagine my feelings of vindication when the director of the camp came jogging in and asked, "How did you survive the earthquake last night?" I know earthquakes. It did happen. The others were so used to it happening that they didn't even notice. Perhaps that's how it can be for us as followers of Christ. We become so desensitized when the ground is shifting, even a little bit, to the point we don't even notice or recognize when we are not firmly planted in the rock of our salvation. As we continue to turn our gaze to the cross this Lent, may we hear the words of Jesus and have the strength to do them. And may we remember the one place where we find our strength and foundation. We find that strength for today and forever. Amen.